On the Dallas Opera Network, you're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm Weston Williams, joined this week by Oliver Camacho, Matt Cummings, and Ashlee Hardgrave. All right, this week in Sportzando, our newest segment, Ashlee draws a straight line from opera houses to ESPN via baseball. Trust us, it works. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, Valery Gergiev is in the news again, more like Valery Grifter-giev. Pause for laughter. If you're watching via the Dallas Opera Network, make sure if you're still watching on the Dallas Opera Network, make sure you subscribe to our podcast to get the full show with all the puns. On Stitcher and Spotify, you can click follow. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, just hit that plus sign. Send us a voice memo or an email, your hot takes at operaboxscore@gmail.com. You'll get an OBS beer coaster and an OBS lapel pin just for sharing your own hot take. I mean, what's not to love, Oliver Camacho?
Okay, a little bit of sports. There is this
diving right in, I see.
20-something
down to
year
business.
20, I forget how old he is. He's a kid, 22 years old, born in 1999. His name is Alejandro Davidovich Fokina. And yesterday, we're recording on Monday the 18th. Yesterday was the finals of the Monte Carlo Masters Series. And he made it to the final, beating Novak Djokovic, world number 1 in the second round. Taylor Fritz, one of the top Americans, in the quarterfinals. Grigor Dimitrov in the semifinals. And coming close in the second set to taking a set off of Stefanos Tsitsipas, who was the repeat winner. So congratulations to Tsitsipas, who still has my heart only for his looks. Stefanos Tsitsipas won the Monte Carlo Masters yesterday, ending the Cinderella story of 22-year-old Alejandro Davidovich Fokina, who I'm sure we're going to hear more from Malaga. As white as he's so white you almost can't see him. I'm serious. I don't know if you all remember David Nalbandian, he was Argentinian, but another one of these tennis players who's just so fair. How do you stay that fair playing in the sun all the day? It's like he's invisible. I mean,
it just reflects the sun.
Yeah.
European sunscreens work.
Speaking of white people, Matt Cummings, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing all right. You know what? Every year, the Monday after Easter, I'm like, why did I not take this day off? But thankfully,
every time.
we got a lot of singers on this podcast coming off of Holy Week. Ashlee, how are you holding up?
We are weary is what we are, but he is risen indeed. Hallelujah. Oh, wait, that was yesterday. I've slept since then.
Honestly, yeah, Matt, you bring up a good point for us singers out there. Why do we do the Easter Vigil? Why? You don't need music for that. You could just talk it out. Talk amongst yourselves.
And that often is the long one. It's the long one. And there's candles.
And there's baptisms. And then there's communion.
And so many readings. Everyone's just got
There's a rabbit running around dropping eggs everywhere. I don't know how to deal with it. Let's talk some opera.
And now, where the histories of music and sports collide. Boom! Sportzando!
Happy baseball season, everybody. Lockouts are
the most
over.
Wonderful time of the year.
Yes.
That's right. Pollen and baseball. Lockouts are over. The opening days have all passed, and the Cubs owners have already bailed on their bid to buy a soccer team. Happy spring! So in today's Sportzando, we're going to talk about baseball and opera. Special and unofficial thanks to writer Mark Shubin, who did some incredible research on this connection that I did a deep, deep, nerdy dive in. So, Cooperstown, New York. It's known for two things, the Baseball Hall of Fame and Glimmerglass Opera.
That's the only two things there.
That's it. That's the whole thing. To that end, maybe like a brewery, I think. I don't know. I digress. There are really humorous sets of anecdotes at this intersection between opera and baseball. Baritone Robert Merrill was actually a semi-pro baseball player before he entered the world of opera and musical theater, and then eventually became the anthem singer for the Yankees, so he's just circling all the way around it. Enrico Caruso was once asked what he thought of Babe Ruth, and his response was, "I don't know. I've never heard her sing."
A man after my own heart.
So precious. But today, I'm going to explain how opera houses basically begat ESPN.
Ooh, do tell.
Yes. So baseball became popular in North America starting in like the 1800s. By the way, that rumor that Abner Doubleday invented baseball, he did not. And by the mid 1850s, baseball was like the craze of New York and most of the Eastern Seaboard. 1876 brought us the National League. 1893 brought us the American League, and that's the foundation for what we know as like modern national baseball competition. And again, late 1890s, so baseball teams are traveling to play each other. So telegraph services were trying to find ways to like report the results and get them back so they'd be in the newspapers the next day. But the fandemonium was so crazy, people were sick of waiting for newspapers. They wanted to find out about the game results as fast as they could. Enter the opera house. Stay with me. Let me explain.
Okay.
I'm
Now-
listening.
Yes. Nashville, Tennessee, 1884. 3 telegraph operators. They came up with this plan to report the game live at Nashville's Masonic Theater for a game with Nashville's baseball team against Chattanooga. Okay, here we go. One of them watched the game on site in Chattanooga, and then they telegraphed the baseball action in short code to the second telegraph operator, who then announced the plays live in Nashville, while a third telegraph operator was moving cards that had the players' names on them around a, quote, painted view of the ball field. In the 1880s, this is what they were doing. And the system became so successful that it eventually moved from the Masonic Theater to the Grand Opera House because they needed more space for more people because people were coming to see this. It increased the audience from 900 to 2,500 per game in 1884.
Well, that is wild to me because, like, you know, I've been, not to brag or anything, I've been to a baseball game. And let me tell you, it's not the most engaging sport of all time in terms of, you know, wanting that action. So it's kind of wild to me that people would go and watch this in an opera house, someone moving around little things on a board. I think that's amazing.
I mean, to be fair, maybe the speed of the game was what lent itself to 3 people telegraphing back and forth so that they could get the results up onto the stage of an opera house. So we've got this in Nashville in 1884. 1886, we move to Atlanta, Georgia, and the Gergiev Opera House. They team up with Western Union Telegraph Company to present their first live baseball game, Atlanta versus Charleston. So according to a paper of the time, the Atlanta Constitution, ladies were admitted free, like the club, and gentlemen paid 15 cents a ticket. So these are the Atlanta upgrades that they did to the performance.
Has feminism gone too far?
In 1886,
These woke
yes.
opera baseball houses are running us out of business.
So here's the thing. Atlanta really decides to like up the ante when it comes to the dramatics of baseball. So on the opera stage, they have boys that are dressed in the uniforms of the players running around on the stage on a simulated ball field, reenacting the things that have been telegraphed. So we went from cards that were moving to like actual little boy humans that were running around and simulating the baseball game. In 1886.
Phenomenal.
So Detroit later that same year, we move into something that's sort of cosplay, it's sort of journalism, it's sort of live art installation. They really kick it up a notch. So the folks from the Nashville team, they set up shop in the Detroit Opera House, where according to the Detroit Free Press, again, this is in 1886, the crowd, quote, followed the progress of the game, even to the smallest details, reacting just such as heard on a veritable ball field. The action was depicted on a huge landscape with a, quote, well-painted perspective view of a baseball diamond and outfield. So basically, opera houses become these, like, dramatic reenactments like you see in crime shows. It was that, but for, like, baseball games that were happening in real time over telegraph being sent across the country.
This might be my favorite art form. I thought it was opera before, but now I think you're changing my mind, Ashlee. This is the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Is this not freaking wild? It's so fascinating. So, okay, these are the late 1880s. By 1895, there were at least 7 U.S. patents for these opera house baseball broadcast systems. And, my friends, you can actually find some of the original patents online. You can see the sketches. You can read like the actual patent itself.
If you're listening on our podcast, check out the Dallas Opera Network this time just to see. I'm going to be flashing them up now. a couple of examples for you.
Oh, they are fascinating. So again, we're really taking off in this Opera House baseball broadcast system. So then between 1889 and 1927, the US issued at least 44 patents for systems just to watch these remote baseball games. So we went from a couple in the 1880s to 7 by 1895 to 40, we'll say 5 by 1927. There was one installed just down the street here in Chicago at Orchestra Hall for the 1908 National League pennant race. And our buddies down in Dallas, they actually saw the Dallas Opera broadcasting the 1912 World Series from their stage. There's actually a whole article on this site called Flashback Dallas, where you can read sort of top to bottom exactly how Dallas Opera put this together for the 1912 World Series.
And doesn't include like when the audience would do the wave back and forth in the opera house.
One would hope. The clothing was a little bit more restricted at the time, so I don't know exactly how many.
I don't know,
people
those
get their
Gibson
arms-
girls can really move when they put their minds to it. That's what I learned from the musical Ragtime.
God. Yeah, so again, I cannot tell you how many hours I spent just looking at all of these, like, you know, different ads from opera houses that were talking about how they were, you know, advertising these baseball games. It was like a big deal. And then these telegraph systems, as we're sort of moving forward and marching on in time, they brought on a slew of electronic systems during the 19-teens and the 1920s, and they were being installed on the sides of buildings and in opera houses nationwide. So there were a whole bunch of companies that were coming out. Like I said, there's 44 patents by 1927. Some of the most prosperous companies for these electronic scoreboards that eventually went into opera houses are, I got some of my favorite names here. The Automatic Baseball Playograph.
Amazing.
The Noakes Electroscore. The Coleman Lifelike Scoreboard.
Very descriptive.
Yes, this one, the very eloquent, the Rodier Electric Baseball Game Reproducer.
That one really rolls off the tongue, I think.
Just so poetic. And my personal favorite, which is Tom May's Electro Wonder Scoreboard.
Not just electric, but also truly wonderful.
A wonder. Well, and the thing is, the Playograph was the one that really, like, jumped out in front of everybody. The Playograph became so popular that, like, the way we think of the word Jumbotron and the word Kleenex, Playograph became so popular that it morphed from, like, a brand name into this universal generic term for this operation. Now, these opera scoreboards, they went deep. So a Coleman, which is the Coleman Lifelike Scoreboard, the Coleman was installed at a Providence Opera House in 1914. And then the Evening News, which is a paper of the time, reported that, quote, even arguments between players and arbitrators are shown.
As Alanis Morissette said it best, thank you, Providence.
You're getting the hot goss, you're getting the tea, you're getting the game all at once, thanks to these magical scoreboards in opera houses. And then operas and newspapers start going into business projects together because this is so lucrative. So in 1931, the Tucson Opera teamed up with the Arizona Daily Star, and they installed a playograph at the Opera House and sponsored an event so that fans could watch the World Series of that year between the St. Louis Cardinals and the Philadelphia Athletics. What's so fun about me about reading baseball history is that you recognize team names, but they're not in the city that you think of them now. So
Right.
St. Louis. Where is that? I couldn't tell you where they are now. But but the Cards are fine. And then the Philadelphia, that's the Athletic. Nope, they have the Phillies. The Oakland has the Athletic. Anyway, it's a fun little, like, shift in your brain to figure out where people are all located. Unfortunately, so we've gone on this, like, you know, fast train to, like, electronic scoreboards. They're all the rage. Everybody's in opera houses watching baseball. But the height of opera house baseball popularity coincided with market saturation and the introduction of this newfangled thing called television.
All
that?
boo. Boo.
Boo, boo. We want little boys running around on stage in outfits. That sounds weird. Please don't use that cut for anything Weston. I don't like it.
Turn it into a GIF.
Nope. So we've got this big boom and then immediately a bust, because as soon as television comes out, there's not as much need for these things anymore. So in 1939, U.S. baseball games are first televised, and the Vincennes Sun commercial in Indiana, which had one of these playographs, didn't even bother putting it up that year because they knew that people were going to be watching on TV instead of coming to the opera house. So at the moment, like right now as we speak, sports TV networks entertain millions of people, but in that pre-TV era between the 1880s and the 1930s, opera house baseball was the thing, and it was entertaining thousands of opera and baseball fans nationwide. And how precious is it that we've seen a reverse renaissance of operas being broadcast to fans in where? Baseball parks. So now you have San Francisco broadcasting their shows at AT&T Park. You have Washington National Opera doing it for Nationals Park. To quote Mark Shubin, who his research helped me get a lot of this stuff together, turnabout is fair play. And that is how opera houses begat ESPN.
Okay.
That's a slow clap moment.
In this research, did you actually just uncover a secret that George Cedarquist has been keeping from us? Is he really like a time traveler? And the idea of the opera box score was not an original idea. It's an idea from back in the pre-war days.
He stole it from Roadier.
Yeah. I mean, I was reading this and I don't know why, but I felt threatened, like the electro playograph was going to come back and replace us as a podcast, because this is, as I said before, the coolest thing that I have never heard of before. And I want to say
this is the
thank
real
you,
opera
Ashlee.
box score. I mean, this is
literally is. That's
We
it.
got like opera, check. Box,
It
box,
took us-
check. Score.
It took
check.
us 7. What season are we in now? 7. It took us 7 years to forget what our name meant.
Listen, a journalist never reveals all her sources. But
Exactly.
I did find, I happened upon an amulet when rubbed 3 times clockwise. A young boy that looked a lot like a little George Cedarquist in a penny hat and some stockings did say, "Come this way and I will show you things." God, I am saying really inappropriate things today. Stop letting me talk. This is terrible. But is this not the coolest thing? I was so fascinated with this. I'm like, this is
I wonder if any still
awesome.
exist. I wonder if any of these big old playographs or anything are around somewhere, gathering dust in the back of an opera house somewhere.
There's got to be. I have not gotten that far in my research, but listeners, if you know anything about where any of these playographs or what are the lifelike scoreboard, the game reproducer, any of those, we'd love to hear about them. Hell, I'll drive to go see one. I am
We're
very
looking for any
fascinated.
hot tips on where we can find an Electro Wonder scoreboard.
Yeah.
Coming
better
over
yet-
to Transom.
Better yet, if you have a grandpa who was around or a grandma that was around in the 30s, show them a picture of young George Cedarquist and see if they recognize him.
Oh, well, if we're talking about time travel, we're talking about units of time. And if we're talking about units of time, we're talking about the 2-minute drill. That's now.
This just in. The 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
Supporters of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny claim that Valery Gergiev has been stealing from his own charity, that he clandestinely owns a Milan restaurant and holds a secret Dutch citizenship. Meanwhile, American conductor and Gergiev protege Gavril Heine has resigned as resident conductor from the Mariinsky Theater, saying, "Russia is not a place I want to raise my son. It is not a place I want to be anymore."
Still facing cancellations both outside of and within Russia itself, Anna Netrebko has been thrown a bone by Opera de Monte Carlo. A company spokesperson says Netrebko made a statement 2 weeks ago regarding the war and her relationship with Putin. She has taken a clear position against the war in Ukraine. Netrebko has been called upon to replace an ailing Maria Agresta in Manon Lescaut, a production that co-stars her husband Yusuf Netrebko, Avazov.
The Ukrainian ambassador to Austria is calling on Salzburg Festival to cancel the performances of the Music Eterna Orchestra. The orchestra's founder and conductor Theodor Korentsis are financed by the sanctioned Russian VTB Bank, which is closely linked to President Putin. Meanwhile, bel canto tenor turned conductor Dmitry Korchak is slated to lead the Moscow Virtuosi State Chamber Orchestra in a concert which will include pro-Putin soprano Hybla Gerzhmava. All my heroes are embarrassing me.
Aw. A pair of Texan philanthropists and longtime patrons have donated $3.3 million to Austin Opera to support Spanish-language programming and the appointment of Claudia Chapa as the inaugural curator of Hispanic and Latinx programming. Said Chapa, quote, "This extraordinary act of philanthropy by Sarah and Ernest Butler will help ensure that our arts programming reflects the city we serve for years to come."
Jonas Kaufmann will be the inaugural recipient of the Corelli 100 Prize, which has been awarded by the Teatro delle Musee in Ancora, the hometown of the prize's namesake, Franco Corelli. In announcing the award, the Teatro delle Musee Foundation said Kaufmann is an artist who, more than any other, today represents the reference interpreter in the opera repertoire, recognized and appreciated by a global audience. The German tenor is scheduled to pick up his award on Sunday, unless he cancels.
Doggies. Okay, good news for fans of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and opera, by which we mean me specifically. 150 items from the late Justice's home and office will be auctioned off later this month to support Washington National Opera. Pieces for sale include an earthenware plate by Pablo Picasso, a black mink coat with RBG's name sewn in the pocket, oh my god, and a caricature that once hung in her Supreme Court office.
Our hometown team, Chicago Opera Theater's 50th season, will feature Karol Szymanowski's King Roger in its Chicago premiere, and Justine Chen's The Life and Deaths of Alan Turing, both conducted by Lydia Jankowskaia, plus Benjamin Britten's Albert Herring, conducted by Dame Jane Glover. The season will also feature the COT Vanguard production of Sean Coppello's The Cook-Off, and a new entry into Jake Heggie and Gene Shear's Holocaust Memorial series, Music of Remembrance.
Arts leaders in France are calling on their followers to vote for President Emmanuel Macron in his runoff election against Marine Le Pen. Among the leaders from the opera world include Alexander Neff from Paris Opera, Louis Langret from the Opera Comique, Richard Brunel from Opéra National de Lyon, Valérie Chevalier from Opéra Orchestre National de Montpellier, and Alain Perroux from the Opéra National du Rhin. And any decent person, if we're being honest.
On the disabled list, 79-year-old conductor and pianist Daniel Barenboim is receiving medical treatment for circulation problems and will cancel all performances through April 22nd. Berlin State Opera will replace Barenboim on the podium for 2 Mozart operas with Giuseppe Mentuccia and Thomas Gugais.
Exit stage right. Belgian composer Philippe Bosmans has died at age 85. Bosmans was known as the longtime composer in residence for the Théâtre du Monet, where his operas, including La Passion de Gilles, Wintermärchen, and Julie, were premiered.
Acclaimed English composer Harrison Birtwistle has died at age 87. Birtwistle was an influential but controversial composer, known for his bold musical ideas and avant-garde sensibilities with operas such as Punch and Judy and The Mask of Orpheus.
As of this recording, we have just learned that celebrated Romanian pianist Radu Lupu has died at age 76 after a long illness. Lupu was frequently cited by fellow musicians as an inspiration and model of an artistic expression, particularly for his interpretations of Brahms, Mozart, Beethoven, and Schubert, whose songs he recorded with soprano Barbara Hendricks.
And on this day, April 18th, in 1682, it was the first performance of Lully's opera Perse in Paris. Italian mezzo-soprano and lover to both of the greatest generals of her time, Giuseppina Grassini was born this day in 1773. In 1797, it was the first performance of Karl Ditters von Dittersdorf's Singspiel Der Mädchenmark. In 1863, it was the birth of Austrian mezzo-soprano Irene von Chavannes, who sang the role of Herodias in the world premiere of Strauss's Salome and took over singing the role of Clytemnestra in Electra since the role's creator, Ernestine Schumann-Heink, dropped out after the first performance.
Legendary.
In 1871, it was the first performance of an American opera called The Temple of Minerva by Francis Hopkin. We say happy birthday to Catherine Malfitano, who was born this day in 1948, and happy birthday to Chinese composer Tan Dun, born this day in 1957. And in 1965, Marian Anderson ended her 30-year singing career with a concert at Carnegie Hall.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
You just heard the birthday girl herself, Catherine Malfitano, singing the Act 4 love duet from Romeo and Juliet with tenor Alfredo Kraus. That's from the Met Centenary Gala in 1983 with Jeffrey Tate conducting. I really like Catherine Malfitano, and I actually really like the recording of Romeo and Juliet that the two of them did together. I think it's with Michel Plasson. I think it's probably, for my money, the best recording of the opera. Because
really,
she like has the heft to get through the really hard parts, but she's able to still make it sound girlish. And so many Juliets sound like Juliet's mom, and it doesn't work quite as well.
And Alfredo Kraus was only 60 when he recorded that.
Right. So a young spring chicken
an impish
Truly
Alfredo
star-crossed lovers. Send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes at operaboxscore@gmail.com to get an OBS beer coaster and an OBS lapel pin. That's just for sharing your own hot take. Don't pay a thing. Just bug George in his inbox, and he'll send you something for free. What a deal.
$3.99.
Just in case you were intrigued about this Grassini story, the two men that she took bed with. How do you say this in a more elegant way? In a more
Took a
I
lover.
don't know if it gets more elegant.
The lovers
than
she
that,
took. Who are the lovers she took, Oliver? What were
The
their
poison to
names?
kill Cusco.
were Napoleon and his arch nemesis, the Duke of Wellington.
Oh.
That seems like a
We-
Netflix
That
series
seems like
in
an
the making.
opera.
That
Yeah.
seems like a real spicy menage a trois to me. I really love
We
the
love-
story about Irene von Chavannes because, speaking of taking over in Elektra, I mean, that was the original production. I don't know how much you know about the story, but a lot of early Strauss was considered it still is considered challenging, but the orchestra literally went on strike, I think more than once.
We've never played
saying that the
anything like
music
this before.
They said the music was unplayable. So I just love the original Clytemnestra, dropping out. And then Siobhan was like, yeah, I'll go in. I'll do it. It's fine. I just love the audacity of that. And I just love me a good people complaining about how difficult the music is or sounds. Which is my segue into saying that I'm really sad about Harrison Burton.
Hold my beer.
This news dropped today. As a matter of fact, I remember I was just kind of sitting at work and I saw it pop up on my news feed. I just wanted to say, it really hit me really deeply. Surprisingly, I did not get into Harrison Birtwistle that quickly. He's a more recent obsession of mine, believe it or not. But especially Mask of Orpheus, the way that piece is constructed is it is avant-garde, sure, but it's like it really follows the core of the drama and the atmosphere of what's going on. A lot of modernists get accused of ignoring the purpose of the music and, being in their own little experiments in their heads, which I also like because that's me. But Birtwistle really understood opera as a dramatic art form. And I think he will be missed and his influence will be missed, at least by me. And I think hopefully some others.
One kind of wild fun fact that comes up in his obituary is that he was the first commissioned to do a modern piece at the proms, and apparently the audience of the proms,
they did not like it.
Did not particularly care for it. They wanted to hear Rule Britannia again instead. Probably.
They did not care for it. No, that's the proms audience.
Bring
for
back
you.
the Elgar.
I want to talk a little bit about Jonas Kaufmann. Oliver, what do you think of this little prize that he's gotten for himself?
We saw this story come through from this theater in Ancora, and I haven't heard of the Teatro delle Musee. I mean, I'm not Italian, so maybe it's a very famous theater. But, Kaufman has engagements in only the most, well-known venues in the world. He doesn't have time for, this little town of Ancora. So I think they invented a Corelli Prize just so they can get Kaufman to come by. Here, we have a prize for you.
We'll see.
Please sign my Christmas CD.
As the definitive interpreter of All I Want for Christmas Is You, do you have anything that you want to tell
I'm glad you said
here?
that because actually the quote from the foundation of the Teatro delle Musee, I thought that was actually a really great thing to say about him. It's a very original take that he is the reference interpreter of some of the, most important roles in the tenor repertoire. I like that. I want to be the reference interpreter of Comfort Ye in Every Valley.
Aw.
Aw, you're my reference, honey. You're mine.
So, Ashlee, do you? I believe when we were going through, I think you had a hot take about the France election, and what's going on.
My question was, how many jobs does Alexander Neef have? We've given him all of those jobs, and now it's his job to tell the people of France and unite with all of these other artists to be like, hey, don't vote for Le Pen because our jobs are toast if that happens. How many? We have relied on our sweet little Neef for so many things. And so I was very confused, but also delighted. And it's also so wild that Macron and Le Pen are in this runoff. She used to be as far right as you could go, and then she leaned a little left, and now there's all these people to the right of her. So there's a whole bunch of other, what's the word in French for lunatics? Le lunatique? I don't know, but like it's terrifying to me that all of these different people exist. But thank you to Alex for taking yet another line on his resume to let the people of France know they need to vote Macron.
Well, you know what? It's a pretty good thing that he decided to take on the job of international political savior and not international crime syndicate leader like Valery Gergiev.
This is a wild story. Like,
he's actually a spy. We didn't realize he works for the KGB. What do you
He's
call
a
it now?
contractor.
Yeah.
This we should say this is all very alleged. I do think that
Well, isn't it always?
It is always, I do think that some of these things that he's being accused of literally don't make sense to me. Like, it's like, he owns property in New York. Ooh, scary. Like, okay, like I'm not entirely sure why that's a revelation. He also owns a restaurant in Milan.
How
apparently.
dare he own a restaurant?
And then the thing that confused me the most: secret Dutch citizenship. Apparently, maybe a big deal in Russia. I don't understand that.
It's probably illegal to have dual citizenship in Russia, but
I'm not 100% sure, but like, Jesus be a shady dry cleaning frontal business. This is insane, this amount of things that's there. I mean, the idea of owning property in other places is a way to funnel and launder money, but also a lot of countries are shutting off the ruble and any funds that are coming in and out of Russia. So I don't know how much longer this is going to last for old Grifter-giev.
That house of cards is going to come tumbling down.
Yeah, what is his charity? Did anybody look that up?
I was like, it's just called the Gergiev Chair. I don't remember exactly what it's called.
Okay,
but
it's like the Trump Foundation type of deal.
Yeah, it's almost exactly the same story.
It's money.
I have my suspicions that I don't think that all of these allegations are true. I think that the Navalny supporters see an opportunity to weaken a Putin ally, and I think they're taking it. Whether it's true or not, I think it's probably something I support in broad terms at the very least.
Maybe they're actually not supporters of Alexei Navalny. Maybe they're supporters of Dmitry Korchak and trying to get Dmitry more conducting gigs.
You've given us something to think about, Oliver.
Yeah. I mean, it's so weird because like I'm crazy about Theodor Korentzis. I'm always promoting his work to early music people and even to non-early music people. I think it's really a very fresh take on a lot of stuff. But I should have known when he started casting Simone Kermes in everything that something is a little bit fishy about that guy. I mean, we do not need to hear her sing La Traviata. We do not need to hear her Norma. We really don't need anything from her, but yeah, she's a weird choice. Yeah. She's a weird choice.
It's one of those things. There's really is the separation of the chaff and the wheat here to a certain extent. What's all wheat, though, I want to talk a little bit about the COT season because, honestly, this is such a cool season. I mean,
we go to the Alan Turing opera together?
We did, yes. Okay. We both
when they were workshopping it.
Yeah. So Oliver and I have seen the sort of sneak preview.
It was the workshop version, yeah.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see how it changes, but it was a very affecting opera. I think Alan Turing is a great subject for
it was a good show.
Yeah.
It was a really good show, and I'm so glad to see that like this. So they have this thing called the Opera Vanguard Fellowship, I guess, where they help composers develop their operatic ideas. And right now they have Matthew Rezio and I forget who the other Vanguard composer is. Well, anyway, Sean O'Peblo is coming through the program. They had Stacey Garib go through I think she was the inaugural fellow in that program. And I think it's a really cool program. And Justine Chen was one of the first shows that they workshopped, The Life and Deaths of Alan Turing. And it was beautiful. It was really, really sentimental and poignant. It's great for the gays. Lots of like gay sadness in it, you know.
All that good stuff.
Yeah.
There's also a little bit of gay sadness in King Roger, honestly.
And in friend of the show Albert Herring, if we're being perfectly honest.
Yeah, there's a little bit.
Is this a season chosen just for me?
Just for Oliver. I'm so excited to see the premiere of King Roger. It's one of my favorites. Sort of like you really detect the hand of Lydia. Like bringing in not just the new stuff. But like the Eastern European stuff, it's a great season.
If I'm not mistaken, Lyric Opera was going to mount King Roger for Mariusz Kwiecien, but then he sort of retired suddenly, so they withdrew that plan. So this really is, I can't believe in a city that has more Polish people than I think Warsaw.
I know, exactly.
I think Warsaw's the only other city that has more Polish people in it.
It's the stat is that Chicago has more Poles than any other city in the world outside of Warsaw.
And we're just now bringing out King Roger.
Yeah. You know what's wild though is like I'm all excited about both of those productions. I'm weirdly excited about Albert Herring.
Oh, it's going to be amazing.
It's going to be so well for two things. Number one, Albert Herring is a hoot, and I can't wait to see sort of what COT does with this. I kind of hope it is a throwback to sort of what they were doing like 15 years ago. And speaking of 15 years ago, the fact that Jane Glover is going to be coming back. She used to be like the person that conducted.
She did the
COT.
Mozart da Ponte trio with Diane Paulus. She did Monteverdi. I think all of the Monteverdi operas, but for sure she did Orfeo. I forget if she did the other two. And she also conducted one of my favorite Abduction Australias I've ever seen in my life, and that's a hard opera to
that one was so good. Yeah,
and like maybe visually it wasn't amazing, but the singing and the music making was so good in that show. So had what's her name, Jane Archibald as Leah Partridge. I'm sorry, had Leah Partridge as Constanza.
But Archibald sang a lot for Glover in that era of COT as well. That Canadian magician.
Yeah, maybe she was Blunchen. Would that have been?
No,
anyway.
While the two of you are trying to remember 15 years ago, I don't want to tell you how young I was 15 years ago. But
I'll burn this place down.
Let's go ahead and wrap this show up. Take it to good call, bad call.
Good call, bad call on Opera Box Score.
All right, good call, bad call. That's how we end the shows around here, around these parts, even when George isn't here. Let's start with Oliver Camacho.
So next weekend, I want to say the Vivica Jeannot is returning to Chicago to sing. You know what? I don't care what she's singing.
Just sing fast. She's singing fast.
This program is called Lucifera. I think it's her own concept with Ruben Dubrovsky, who is conducting. It's like rando, high Baroque composers that you've never heard of before. And I'm sure it's all just crazy nutsball, coloratura, high and low. That's what she does. And I'm here for it. So check it out if you're in Chicago, Third Coast Baroque, the weekend of the 29th, I want to say.
Matt Cummings.
Yeah, just a quick shout out from me that since I was on the show last hour, friend of the show, Rachel Willis-Swordson's
This is my good call last week, by the way.
Okay, well, I didn't listen to the show that I wasn't on. But I'm going to repeat it because this album is a bop.
Yeah. What I want to say about this, I think I said it, but I'll say it again. This is repertoire she actually sings. There are so many sopranos who come out with amazing voices and then record arias from operas they've never even been in, But this is her rep, and it feels lived in, and it's so good. She sounds incredible on this record.
Ashlee Hardgrave.
I have two pieces of media that I recommend you consume after this podcast. The first is our Lord and Savior hosted SNL last week. Lizzo, our Lord and Savior, hosted SNL last week. It is incredible.
It's so funny.
It is incredible. She double dutied as musical guest and host. It was incredible. Definitely check out the Cut for Time sketches. They're gold. And then second, because we're coming off of Easter week, I have this weird tradition where I watch Jesus Christ Superstar, or some version of it during that week. I just discovered, this is new to me, so if you're someone who knows it, congratulations to you. The 40th anniversary of London's West End premiere, they did an arena production with Tim Minchin as Judas and Mel C from the Spice Girls as
Sporty
Mary
Spice,
Magdalene.
to be precise.
Yes, Sporty Spice. It's from like 2012, and it's oddly wonderful. I encourage you to find it and check it out.
I have a good call this week. I saw a review in the Los Angeles Times that I wanted to bring up. This is a production that took place in the Walt Disney Concert Hall with the LA Philharmonic and in collaboration with Deaf West Theater, which was a production of Fidelio that included deaf actors, and all of the dialogue was completely signed and projected out. And just reading the description, like, kind of makes my heart warm up. It's so amazing, because when we say we want opera to be something that can be experienced by anybody, sometimes we just don't think about the people who can, like, physically, like, not experience it in the same way that hearing people do. And I think it was just so amazing how so many deaf audience members got to come out and experience Beethoven and Fidelio in a way that spoke to not just them, but everyone else in the audience as well. And it really was, sounds like an amazing production. It reminds me of the famous anecdote about Helen Keller, who listened by touching speakers, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and she felt the vibrations and felt the power of the performance. And I think that there's just a real power in music that transcends even the ability to hear it sometimes. And I think it's extraordinary that productions like this are out there. That is it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio Show about opera. Our announcer is Norm Waddell, who can be found at normwaddell.com. If you're watching on the Dallas Opera Network, make sure you subscribe to our podcast to get the full show. On Stitcher or Spotify, you can click follow. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can just hit that little plus sign. Send a voice memo or email us your hot takes at operaboxscore@gmail.com. You'll get an OBS beer coaster and an OBS lapel pin just for sharing your own hot take. Our creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. Our audio and video editor is this guy. For our co-hosts, Matt Cummings and Ashlee Hardgrave, I'm Weston Williams, asking you to continue the conversation about opera in Valery Gergiev's secret Milan restaurant. The password is pancetta.
Pancetta.
We're back with an all-new show next week. You'll get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more RBG monogrammed into the pockets of your pants. Join us.